so it's like, oh, we can actually use our cell phones in class. And so that's one way I've actually utilized that technology aspect. And another thing is the personal stories. And again, depending on your teaching style and what you're comfortable with, you might not want to do this, but they always love hearing personal stories. Like, okay,
we all do, right? We're nosy as a society. We like personal stories. I tell them that about giving speeches. I'm like, if you can tell a personal story,
yeah,
we want to hear it.
We want to hear it.
Building ethos.
Exactly.
Building ethos.
Right. But it does need to be appropriate, you know. But I do kind of scare them off a little bit with the fact that public speaking is not that hard. But I do tell them some of my horror stories. You know, we all have them. We all have our horror stories. You know, I've got the suicide boy. I had a student who did a speech on suicide and asked if he could pass out razor blades at the end of his presentation.
I use that as an example in my class every semester.
Oh, what?
You use it as an
I
example?
use that as an example.
I've had a student use an inappropriate word. This was my television course up in Rome, and she quite obviously, she was talking about how government does a poor job of covering up scandals. She quite obviously meant to say snow job, however, the word that came out was blow job.
Oh.
And so I had to tell sweet little Susie that she said this word because she didn't realize it.
Aww.
Because I didn't know if her grandma Sue was watching and wondering why she's saying that word, so I felt she needed to know. But my very first semester teaching as a grad student, I had a student who turned in his topic for smoking. And I thought, oh, he would talk about the dangers of smoking, maybe why one shouldn't smoke. Oh no, this is now why I require the outline in advance, by the way, because of this student. So he gets up there, and I swear to God, his first question was, how many of you like to get high? And like a couple hands go up in the audience. And he's like, today I'm going to teach you how to roll and smoke your own joint. I am not kidding. So he lays out like 3 pre-cut sheets of paper, and he pulls out a little baggie from his front pocket. It was not oregano. He tells us how to siphon it out, then shows us how to fold. And at that point I stopped his speech because I really thought he was going to pull out a lighter and then demonstrate how to use it. So obviously he was expelled. I mean, how dumb are you to think bringing contraband to campus is a good idea? So when I tell those stories, they're like, oh, well, this is not going to be that bad as long as we don't bring marijuana to school or bring razor blades, then we're good. So I think telling those personal stories or things that have happened, you know, protecting the, the person, but I think they relate to those quite well.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about, and one of the things I want to point out, I was doing some quick little research last night looking at best practices on some other university websites, and one of the main things I kept finding comes down to lecture. And they keep talking about the length of lecture. And obviously our students at this generation are not big lecture fans, right? They would rather watch a lecture on TV than in person. You know, if they're gonna have to watch a lecture, they're like, ooh, media, yay! Even though it's not more exciting. But if they're gonna listen to lecture, if you're gonna do any kind of lecture, break it up, right? If you've got 40, 30 minutes of lecture, try to break it into like 2-3 sections of the class period. Do other things in between, even if it's like using quick little surveys or questionnaires and then having them discuss back, or if it's group work or whatever it is. I think my successful class days is when I incorporate at least 3 different types of learning, whether that be lecture, usually it's like lecture, group work, maybe some sort of media, whether we listen to a song on like listening day, I do the song thing, we do a little quiz to see how well they listened, or watching some sort of television episode and trying to use pop culture and relate it to the chapter, those kinds of things. But we still lecture, but I try to not do, and like all the research was showing me, no more than 10 to 20 minutes at a time. You will lose them at that point, unless you're breaking and doing something else and going along with it. So that's something to really point out about lecture.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, and I know some of you might use PowerPoint and some of you don't. For years I did not, because I happen to be more of an auditory learner. I learn by listening, so it's very easy for me to learn that way. I actually get distracted by things like PowerPoint, and so for me it was a hard transition, but I had students clamoring for the PowerPoints. And so what I have done is trying to take publishers' PowerPoints and just break them up into bullets, just because I think just having a few bullets on a page is ample enough information, and I'm not going to spend the class period rehashing what you should have read anyway.
Yeah.
And so I actually communicate that. And so what's been great about the books that we've used recently is that they have these online resources that you can have downloaded straight to your phone, and it has the entire outlines of each chapter. And so I tell them just print those off, bring those to class. That'll give you a basic framework, and then you can add to the material. So that way it takes the pressure off of you, because I don't know if you've had this experience, you're ready to move on to the next PowerPoint, and your students are still writing things down. So it definitely slows down the class time. But like Erica was saying, the breaking up and doing activities is really effective. One thing that I have also incorporated, I have You Teach the Teacher Day. And I, put in a hat all these different topics, and I tell them kind of, in general kind of practices, okay, here's the topic of discussion, and then I tell them to bring in either a video clip, or they can bring in a song, like you were mentioning, or they can talk about a TV show or movie where they talk about this particular communication aspect. And I know that's letting control of your class, but I really think they think it's so much fun. I mean, it can be slightly chaotic, but they love it. I don't understand.
I did a similar activity recently where we didn't even plan it in advance. I did, but they didn't. And what I did is I took, the chapter just happened to work out really well where it broke up into 4 sections, and each section had like 5 or 6 main things to talk about, right? And so I broke it down. I gave 1 sheet of paper to each, had them get into groups, 1 sheet of paper to each group. There were about 5 people on each group, 25 to 6. And I had them then break it down. They each had to learn as much as they could about that one little, it could have just been one small concept, right? But they had to come up with examples, because I was like, how do you learn best? And we talked about supporting material. They had to come up with examples for it. And then as a group, they came up, and I had a PowerPoint up listing those 5, 6 things, and they taught it to the class. And oh my gosh, it went so well, because I only gave them like 10 minutes to do as much research as possible, to come up with examples. It was like this quick, okay, gotta do it, came up and taught it, and it went seamlessly. People loved it, and I swear they did best on that chapter on their test. Like, that was the chapter that everybody did really well on.
That hands-on learning.
Yeah, and they got to hear each other instead of me, which was probably a nice break for them.
Okay, let's see.
That's about a little bit of this.
Yeah. Letting them teach you. One other thing I was going to say is this, and I know this is the challenge for some of you who only teach like on one campus, or maybe you teach on multiple campuses and can't have office hours. I cannot tell you how much my students say they appreciate me being so accessible. I usually come in and I talk to them at the beginning of class, how's your weekend, what's going on in pop culture. We'll talk about the VMAs the night before, something like that. And they really seem to gravitate towards you when you actually expose yourself and make yourself more open to them. And so then it's not as scary coming to your office, because I always offer, and I'm sure many of you do too, to help them plan their next semester of studying. And I think when you open up that opportunity for them to communicate with you and get to know you on a more comfortable level, that also allows you that opportunity to do that. And so, I think some teachers might give the persona that, I'm just here to teach my class and then I go home. And I don't think your students benefit from your experience when you do that. So I would just say always make yourselves accessible. Whether it's, checking your emails more often, or whether it's responding in a quicker fashion, but being there for them so they can actually see that you care.
Yeah, and I'm quite honest with them about the ways in which I will get back to them the quickest. Like, even though we have to put all these different forms of communication and ways to get a hold of us on our syllabus, I'm very honest, and I'm like, email is the best way. I'm obsessed with my iPhone. I will respond quite quickly. I'm like, phone, like calling me in my office, no. Most of the time, yes, I have office hours, but I teach so many classes this semester. I'm like, I'm in class all the time. I'm not going to get your message as quickly as I'm going to get your email. And so I tell them that I'm not a big fan of my office phone. I will check it every few days, but that's about it. And so, then they want to email on Vista, and I'm like, I don't check that near as much. Like, if you want a quick response, email me. Those other ways are there, but you're just not going to get the response you want. So I'm just very honest with them about this is the best way.
You can disable this.
Yeah, you can.
I think I'm going to. I didn't realize I could do that. That's a great idea.
Do that.
I didn't disable it, but I have it forwarded to my Highland.
That's what I have.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I didn't know that.
The only problem with the forwarding is you can't reply there.
Okay.
On the iPhone. Yeah.
You can. I can reply there.
Maybe you've got yours set up
Well, I
differently.
do have distribution lists of all the email addresses, though, so maybe. That's
Okay,
why
because you
it's
just
okay.
can't hit reply to the email because it's a do not reply email address.
Okay. I'm just going to disable it.
You're
Get rid of that problem.
Yeah. Do not. But, specifically, because I know, like, Meredith and Laura Beth primarily teach on one campus on 2 days a week, and so it might be harder for their students to see them on opposite days, but they are always so accessible, whether it's through email or Vista, or,
Or
even if
if they
they
use
have
the Facebook or
Right.
something like that. Yeah.
So I think your students appreciate that when you make the time and effort to see them or be there for them
Right.
when they need to have questions or concerns.
Okay. Good job with any of this.
Yeah, you want to wrap up there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to kind of wrap up by talking about assignments and assessments and how you handle all of that. And of course, the main word I think that goes into assignments and assessments is clarity. Being as clear as you possibly can about what is expected of them. Of course, they hate, and we hate too, the uncertainty, right? Like, we don't like to have that, and so reduce it for them as much as possible. And so with assignments, that's another reason I put everything online. I have it written out. I mean, each speech assignment is at least 4 pages long. Like, it has the basic details on the first page, tips on the